Some doors are so dangerous that grown men are afraid to touch them, but that night, a 2-year-old boy pushed one open with his tiny hands and changed the life of the most feared man in Manhattan forever. The marble floor felt freezing beneath Noah Bennett's bare feet as he crawled through the silent hallway of the Moretti Grand Hotel at nearly 2 in the morning. His small dinosaur pajama pants dragged softly against the polished stone while the golden chandeliers above reflected in his wide blue eyes like distant stars. Somewhere far behind him, industrial dryers hummed from the laundry basement where his mother had left him sleeping inside a basket of folded towels. Claire Bennett had only looked away for 10 minutes. 10 minutes to clean the presidential suite upstairs before the night manager started screaming again about employees falling behind schedule. 10 minutes to survive another shift that barely paid enough to keep the lights on in their tiny Queens apartment. But children didn't understand exhaustion. Children didn't understand overdue rent notices or empty refrigerators or why their mothers cried quietly in bathrooms with the shower running. Noah only knew he had woken up alone. And now he was searching for her. The hallway stretched endlessly around him, lined with black-framed photographs and dark mahogany doors that belonged to men rich enough to own pieces of cities. Noah's tiny hand pressed against the wall to steady himself as he stood for a moment, wobbling slightly on tired legs. Then he saw the light beneath the large steel doors at the end of the corridor. Voices echoed from inside. Deep voices. Angry voices. The kind adults used when children were supposed to stay away. But Noah wasn't afraid. He clutched his little green plastic dinosaur against his chest and kept walking. Inside the private executive office, Vincent Moretti sat at the head of a 40-foot black conference table while 6 men in tailored suits argued in low controlled voices around him. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, turning the city lights blurry and distant. Vincent barely listened to the discussion. His gray eyes remained fixed on the whiskey glass in front of him while one of his captains explained how a trusted business partner had betrayed their organization. Another man suggested consequences. Another suggested warnings. Vincent said nothing. He rarely needed to. Silence carried more weight when it came from him. At 34 years old, Vincent Moretti had built an empire powerful enough to make politicians nervous and businessmen obedient. Men twice his age lowered their eyes when he entered a room. His name traveled through New York in whispers. Cold. Precise. Untouchable. But none of that mattered at 2:13 in the morning when the office door suddenly creaked open 3 inches. Every head turned instantly. 2 security guards reached beneath their jackets. The room froze. Then a tiny blonde-haired boy crawled into the office clutching a plastic dinosaur. Noah stopped in the middle of the massive room and blinked slowly beneath the crystal lights. The men around the table stared at him like they couldn't understand what they were seeing. A child didn't belong here. Not in this room. Not near these men. One guard moved forward carefully. "Sir," Vincent lifted one finger. The guard stopped immediately. Noah looked around with sleepy confusion before his eyes landed on Vincent sitting silently at the end of the table. The little boy tilted his head. Then, slowly, he walked closer. Expensive Italian shoes surrounded him. Dark suits towered above him. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Noah finally stopped beside Vincent's chair and held up the small green dinosaur with both hands. His voice came out soft and sleepy. "You look sad." The entire room went silent. Truly silent. Vincent stared at the child for several long seconds without blinking. Then something unfamiliar moved behind his cold gray eyes. Not anger. Not irritation. Something worse. Something human. Noah rested his tiny hand against Vincent's knee like he had known him forever. "Mommy cries too," he whispered. And for the first time in years, Vincent Moretti forgot entirely about the empire sitting in front of him. Claire Bennett realized her son was gone the moment she heard the laundry cart crash against the tile floor downstairs. The stack of white hotel towels she had been folding slipped from her trembling hands as panic rushed through her chest so fast it nearly stole her breath. "Noah," she called softly at first, glancing around the empty service hallway outside the presidential suite. Nothing. Her heartbeat doubled instantly. "Noah." Louder this time. Still nothing. The industrial dryers hummed endlessly behind her while cold fear spread through her body like ice water. Claire dropped to her knees beside the laundry basket where she had left him sleeping less than 15 minutes earlier. Empty. Only his small dinosaur blanket remained tangled between folded sheets. Oh God. Her voice cracked. Every terrible possibility slammed into her at once. A child wandering alone through a luxury hotel at 2 in the morning. Rich drunk guests. Service elevators. Stairwells. Busy streets outside filled with rain and speeding taxis. Claire grabbed her phone with shaking hands and rushed into the corridor, nearly colliding with another maid pushing a cleaning cart. "Have you seen a little boy? Blonde hair, blue dinosaur pajamas." The woman blinked sleepily and shook her head. Claire did not wait for another answer. She was already running. Her cheap black housekeeping shoes slapped against marble floors as she searched hallway after hallway beneath crystal chandeliers and silent security cameras. Her lungs burned. Her throat tightened harder every second she could not find him. She should never have brought him here tonight. But babysitters cost money she did not have. Daycare closed at 6. Her landlord wanted 2 months overdue rent by Friday. And Noah had been coughing again this week. The pharmacy inhaler alone cost almost $80 without insurance. So she had done what desperate mothers did. Survive first. Feel guilty later. She turned another corner too quickly and almost crashed directly into Marcus, the night manager. His sharp eyes narrowed immediately. "Claire, what the hell are you doing running through guest floors?" She could barely breathe. "My son is missing." His expression darkened instantly. "You brought your kid here again?" The disappointment in his voice hurt worse because it sounded exhausted instead of angry. Claire swallowed hard. "Please. I just need 5 minutes." Marcus rubbed his forehead before lowering his voice. "You know the owner has private meetings upstairs tonight. If security finds out there is an employee child wandering around this hotel, you are done here." Her stomach dropped. Done. Fired. The word echoed through her head louder than the storm outside. She could not lose this job. Not now. Not with only $43 left in her checking account. But none of that mattered if Noah was alone somewhere terrified and crying for her. Claire turned toward the executive elevator anyway. Marcus caught her wrist gently before she could move. "Claire." His voice softened slightly. "Take a breath." She looked at him with watery eyes. "I cannot lose him." Something in her face must have reached him because Marcus slowly released her arm. "Check the top floor," he said quietly. One of the guards mentioned seeing something near the private offices. Claire did not even thank him. She sprinted toward the elevator with tears burning behind her eyes while thunder shook the hotel windows. Upstairs, inside the private conference room, nobody had resumed talking. Vincent Moretti still sat motionless at the head of the table while the tiny boy beside him carefully placed the plastic dinosaur onto the polished black wood. Noah stared curiously at the untouched whiskey glass in front of Vincent before wrinkling his nose. "That smells yucky." One of the older men at the table actually coughed, trying to hide a laugh. Vincent slowly leaned back in his chair, studying the child with an unreadable expression. Noah pointed toward the silver watch on Vincent's wrist. "That is shiny." Vincent glanced down at the expensive watch he had not removed in 6 years. Then back at the child. "Do you always walk into rooms that do not belong to you?" Noah nodded innocently. "I was looking for Mommy." Something painful flickered briefly across Vincent's face before disappearing behind cold control again. Then the office doors suddenly burst open. Claire stumbled inside breathless and shaking, her blonde hair falling loose from its clip. The moment her terrified eyes landed on Noah standing beside Vincent Moretti, all the color drained from her face. For one terrifying second, Claire Bennett thought she had walked into the wrong room entirely. The office looked less like a business suite and more like the kind of place powerful men made decisions that changed lives. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the stormy Manhattan skyline behind a massive black conference table where 6 men in dark tailored suits sat completely silent. Security guards stood near the walls with the stillness of trained soldiers. And at the center of it all sat Vincent Moretti with her son standing beside him like he belonged there. Claire's pulse slammed painfully against her ribs. "Noah." Her voice broke as she rushed forward across the marble floor. Noah immediately smiled when he saw her. "Mommy." He lifted both arms toward her without fear, still clutching the little green dinosaur in one hand. Claire scooped him into her chest so fast her knees nearly gave out beneath her. She buried her face against his soft blonde hair and inhaled shakily like she needed proof he was real. "Do not ever run away from me like that again," she whispered, her voice trembling. Noah rested his tiny head against her shoulder. "I was looking for you." Claire closed her eyes tightly for half a second before forcing herself to look up. The moment her gaze met Vincent Moretti's, every survival instinct inside her screamed at once. He was even more intimidating up close than the stories whispered among hotel staff. Tall. Controlled. Cold in a way that did not need raised voices to be frightening. His dark charcoal suit fit perfectly against broad shoulders, and silver cufflinks reflected the dim office lights whenever he moved his hand. But it was his eyes that unsettled her most. Gray. Sharp. Watching her like he could see every sleepless night she had tried to hide beneath makeup and forced smiles. Claire tightened her hold on Noah instinctively. "I am so sorry, sir." Her words rushed out too quickly. "I only brought him because my sitter cancelled and I could not miss another shift, and I swear this will never happen again." Nobody answered immediately. The silence stretched painfully long beneath the sound of rain hitting the windows. Claire became painfully aware of her appearance. Cheap housekeeping uniform. Damp blonde hair escaping from a loose bun. Exhaustion carved beneath her eyes. She looked completely out of place inside this room filled with expensive watches and quiet power. Vincent finally stood from his chair. The movement alone changed the atmosphere instantly. Every man at the table straightened slightly without thinking. Claire noticed it immediately. The authority. The automatic obedience. Vincent stepped around the conference table slowly until he stood only a few feet away from her and Noah. Up close, he smelled faintly like cedarwood and expensive cologne mixed with the cold rain drifting in from the city outside. Noah peeked curiously over Claire's shoulder. "Mommy," he looked sad. One of the men behind Vincent looked down quickly, almost hiding another laugh. But Vincent did not smile. His eyes remained fixed on Claire instead. Then his gaze lowered slightly. Claire stiffened immediately when she realized what he was looking at. The faint yellow bruise near her wrist where her uniform sleeve had slipped down while grabbing Noah. Shame crawled hot beneath her skin. She quickly adjusted the sleeve higher. Too late. Vincent had already seen it. Something unreadable darkened behind his expression. "How old is your son?" he asked quietly. Claire swallowed hard. 2. Vincent nodded once before looking at Noah again. "And why is a 2-year-old awake inside a hotel at this hour?" The question should have sounded judgmental. Instead, it sounded controlled. Careful. Which somehow felt worse. Claire lowered her eyes briefly. "Because I cannot afford not to work." The truth slipped out before she could stop it. The room stayed silent again. Noah reached toward Vincent suddenly and held up the tiny dinosaur. "You can hold him if you want." Claire nearly stopped breathing. But Vincent surprised everyone. Slowly, almost cautiously, he accepted the small plastic dinosaur into his large hand like it was something fragile. Noah smiled proudly. His name is Rex. Vincent stared at the toy for several long seconds before speaking in a softer voice than anyone in the room had probably ever heard from him. I had one like this when I was little. The confession hung quietly in the air. Claire blinked in surprise. Then one of the guards near the doorway touched his earpiece suddenly. His posture shifted instantly. Sir, he said carefully. There is a problem downstairs. Vincent's eyes never left Claire's face. What kind of problem? The guard hesitated briefly before answering. A man is demanding to see Miss Bennet. He says she owes him money. Claire's blood turned ice cold. The fear hit Claire so hard she nearly lost her balance. Her fingers tightened around Noah instantly while heat drained from her face. She did not need to ask who the man downstairs was. She already knew. Daniel Harper had always arrived exactly when her life felt most fragile. Like he could smell weakness from miles away. Vincent noticed the change immediately. The panic. The way her shoulders stiffened protectively around the child. The tiny tremor in her breathing. He glanced once toward the guard near the door. How did he get inside my hotel? The guard straightened. He forced his way past valet security claiming he was family. Vincent's jaw tightened slightly at the word family. Claire shook her head quickly. He is not family. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. He is my ex-boyfriend. One of the men at the conference table muttered something under his breath. Vincent ignored him completely. His attention remained fixed on Claire. Why is he here? Claire looked down at Noah instead of answering immediately. Her son rested quietly against her shoulder, unaware of the tension tightening the room around them. She swallowed hard. He wants money. Vincent's expression did not change. Does he normally come looking for you at your workplace in the middle of the night? Claire hesitated too long. That was answer enough. The rain outside crashed harder against the windows while thunder rolled over Manhattan like distant drums. Vincent slowly reached into his suit pocket and removed a pair of black leather gloves before slipping them on with calm precision. The simple movement somehow made the room colder. Claire felt it instantly. Everyone else did too. Stay here, he said quietly. Her head snapped up. No, the word escaped before she could stop it. Vincent paused. Claire shifted Noah higher against her chest. Please, she whispered. Do not make this worse. Vincent studied her silently for several seconds. Then his eyes dropped again toward the faint bruise near her wrist. Worse for who? Claire could not answer that question honestly. Not when she already knew Daniel would blame her for this somehow. He always did. Noah suddenly lifted his sleepy head from her shoulder and frowned slightly. Mommy cries when loud man comes home. The room went perfectly still again. Claire felt humiliation burn hot beneath her skin. Noah, she whispered quickly. But the little boy kept looking at Vincent with innocent honesty. He broke Mommy's phone. Vincent's gray eyes darkened slowly. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just colder. Controlled in a way that felt far more dangerous than shouting ever could. One of the older men near the conference table quietly looked away. Claire closed her eyes briefly. She hated this. Hated strangers knowing pieces of her life. Hated looking weak in front of people powerful enough to destroy her without effort. But most of all, she hated that Noah had noticed more than she thought. Vincent finally turned toward the security guard again. Bring him to the lobby. Claire's stomach dropped instantly. Please do not do that. Vincent looked at her over his shoulder. Do you trust him around your son? She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because the answer was no. She had stopped trusting Daniel months ago. Maybe longer. The silence stretched painfully. Vincent nodded once like he had heard her answer anyway. Then he walked toward the office doors with the calm confidence of a man nobody dared stop. 2 guards immediately followed behind him. Claire stood frozen for half a second before hurrying after them with Noah still in her arms. The private elevator descended smoothly through the massive hotel while nobody spoke. Soft piano music drifted faintly through. Hidden speakers above them, almost absurd against the tension filling the small space. Noah yawned sleepily against Claire's shoulder. Vincent stood beside her with his hands folded calmly in front of him, his reflection sharp and unreadable in the mirrored elevator walls. Claire tried not to look at him directly. It was impossible not to feel his presence. The controlled stillness. The authority. The strange sense that everything around him operated according to invisible rules only he understood. The elevator doors opened into the grand marble lobby 30 seconds later. Daniel Harper was already there shouting at 2 security guards near the front desk. His cheap leather jacket was soaked from the rain outside, and frustration twisted across his face as guests pretended not to stare. Then Daniel saw Claire standing beside Vincent Moretti. And suddenly all the color disappeared from his face. The grand lobby of the Moretti Hotel suddenly felt too quiet. Rainwater dripped from Daniel Harper's jacket onto the polished marble floor while wealthy guests near the entrance lowered their voices and slowly stepped farther away. Nobody wanted to stand too close to tension that looked expensive. Claire felt Noah stir sleepily against her shoulder the moment Daniel took one step forward. "Claire." His voice came out sharp at first before softening unnaturally when he noticed Vincent standing beside her. "I have been calling you all night." Claire tightened her grip on Noah without answering. Daniel's eyes moved quickly between her and Vincent Moretti like he was trying to understand a situation far above his pay grade. Vincent stood completely still beside her with one hand resting loosely in his coat pocket. Calm. Controlled. Untouchable. The entire lobby seemed to bend around his silence. Daniel forced an awkward smile. "Sir, sorry about all this. We are just having a private disagreement." Vincent's gray eyes rested on him without warmth. "You forced your way into my hotel at 2 a.m. Daniel swallowed visibly. "I just needed to talk to Claire." "Then you should have called during business hours." The sentence was not loud. That somehow made it worse. Daniel laughed nervously while rubbing the back of his neck. "Right. Of course. Look, Claire and I have history. Couples fight sometimes." Claire felt nausea twist in her stomach at the word couples. Noah suddenly buried his face against her shoulder again. The little boy always did that around raised voices or sudden tension. Vincent noticed immediately. His gaze lowered briefly toward the child before returning to Daniel. "Does he seem comfortable around you?" Daniel's expression tightened for half a second. "Kids get tired." Vincent took one slow step forward. Expensive dress shoes moved soundlessly across marble. "That was not my question." The air changed instantly. Claire could almost feel it. Security near the front desk straightened subtly. Guests nearby stopped pretending not to watch. Even the pianist in the lounge seemed quieter somehow. Daniel looked toward Claire desperately now. "Are you seriously standing here with this guy against me?" Claire finally spoke, her voice tired more than angry. "You showed up at my job screaming in the middle of the night. Because you blocked my number. Because you kept showing up outside my apartment." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I was trying to fix things." Claire almost laughed at that. Fix things. Like broken dishes glued back together after being thrown across kitchens. Like apologies delivered with flowers after nights filled with shouting. Like promises repeated so many times they stopped meaning anything at all. Vincent watched her carefully. "Has he threatened you before?" Claire hesitated again. Daniel noticed immediately. "Claire. Warning sat beneath his voice now. Subtle. Familiar. The kind that used to make her immediately apologize even when she had done nothing wrong. But something felt different tonight. Maybe it was the warm weight of Noah asleep against her shoulder. Maybe it was the storm pounding outside. Or maybe it was standing beside a man powerful enough that fear no longer felt automatic. Claire slowly lifted her eyes toward Vincent. I just want him to leave us alone. Daniel scoffed harshly. Us? His eyes flicked toward Vincent again. You think this guy actually cares about you? Vincent answered before Claire could. She works for me. The sentence landed heavily across the lobby. Simple. Controlled. Final. Daniel blinked in confusion. She is a maid. Vincent's expression never changed. And this is my hotel. Silence crashed down again. Claire stared at Vincent in surprise while Noah sleepily lifted his head. Daniel shifted uncomfortably beneath the weight of several security guards now watching him closely. Look, he muttered. I did not come here for trouble. Vincent nodded once toward the front entrance where rain blurred the Manhattan streets beyond the glass doors. Then leave peacefully. Daniel looked at Claire one final time. Something ugly flickered behind his eyes before disappearing beneath forced calm. You always think someone is going to save you. Claire felt her chest tighten painfully because part of her had once believed that too. But before she could answer, Noah suddenly peeked over her shoulder and whispered sleepily toward Vincent, Can we go home now? The little boy sounded so trusting. So safe. Vincent looked at Noah for a long quiet second before answering in the gentlest voice Claire had heard all night. Yes, kid. You are going home. Claire did not understand what Vincent Moretti meant until 10 minutes later when she found herself sitting in the back seat of a black Escalade moving silently through rain-soaked Manhattan streets at nearly 3 in the morning. Noah slept curled against her chest beneath an expensive wool blanket someone had placed over him before they left the hotel. Outside the tinted windows, city lights smeared across wet pavement while thunder rolled softly above the skyline. Claire still felt tense enough to shatter. You do not have to do this, she said quietly for the third time since leaving the hotel. Vincent sat across from her inside the spacious SUV, one arm resting against the leather seat beside him. Do what? Drive us home. You said your son wanted to go home. His answer came calm and unreadable as always. Claire looked down at Noah's sleeping face. His tiny fingers still clutched the plastic dinosaur against his chest. She brushed damp blonde curls away from his forehead. Gently before whispering, people do not help for free. Vincent's gray eyes lifted toward her slowly. That sounds like experience talking. Claire stared out the rain-covered window instead of answering. Queens looked different this late at night. Smaller somehow. Tired. Steam drifted from subway grates while old apartment buildings stood packed tightly together beneath flickering streetlights. The Escalade finally turned onto her block 20 minutes later. Claire immediately felt embarrassment crawl through her stomach. The building looked even worse after leaving the polished marble luxury of the Moretti Hotel. Old brick stained dark by years of rain. Rusted fire escapes. One broken front light blinking weakly above the entrance. Vincent looked out the window quietly while the driver parked at the curb. Claire adjusted Noah carefully in her arms. Thank you for the ride. She reached for the door handle before Vincent spoke again. What floor? Claire hesitated. Third. Vincent opened his own door first. Rain and cold wind immediately rushed into the vehicle. Claire blinked in confusion. What are you doing? Walking you upstairs. That is not necessary. Vincent stood on the sidewalk beneath the storm, tall and composed in his dark overcoat while rain collected along the sharp edges of his shoulders. Humor me. Claire almost argued again. But exhaustion pressed too heavily behind her eyes. So instead, she climbed out carrying Noah while Vincent followed beside her through the dim apartment entrance that smelled faintly like old pipes and cheap cigarettes. The elevator had been broken for almost 4 months. Claire shifted Noah higher against her chest before starting up the narrow stairs. Halfway to the 3rd floor, Vincent noticed her breathing change. Not dramatic. Just strained enough to matter. "Give him to me." Claire stopped immediately. "What?" Vincent extended both hands calmly toward the sleeping child. "You are exhausted." Claire instinctively tightened her hold on Noah. Nobody carried her son except her. Not daycare workers. Not neighbors. Certainly not men like Vincent Moretti. But then Noah stirred sleepily against her shoulder and coughed softly into her neck. Claire's arms already ached from the long shift and emotional exhaustion crushing her chest. Slowly, carefully, she transferred Noah into Vincent's arms. The contrast nearly stunned her. Vincent looked impossibly dangerous in his dark coat and polished shoes standing beneath flickering hallway lights. Yet somehow Noah settled immediately against him without fear. Tiny arms wrapped loosely around Vincent's neck while his small head rested trustingly against the man's shoulder. Vincent adjusted the blanket around him with surprising gentleness before continuing up the stairs. Claire watched silently from one step below, something strange tightening painfully in her chest. Nobody had ever carried Noah like that before. Not carefully. Not like he mattered. They reached apartment 3B moments later. Claire unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside first. The apartment was small enough that the kitchen practically touched the living room. Old beige walls. Second-hand furniture. A leaking radiator ticking softly near the window. Vincent entered slowly behind her carrying Noah while taking in every detail without speaking. Claire suddenly saw her home through his eyes. The stack of unpaid bills beside the microwave. The patched couch cushions. The grocery list on the fridge where milk and cough medicine were both circled twice because she could only afford one this week. Shame burned hot beneath her skin again. Vincent finally lowered Noah gently onto the small pull-out couch beside a faded blue pillow. The little boy sighed softly in his sleep before instinctively reaching toward Vincent's coat sleeve. "Stay." The tiny sleepy whisper nearly broke something invisible in the room. Vincent stood completely still beside the couch for several long seconds while Noah's small fingers curled trustingly around his hand. Claire stood frozen beside the tiny living room while rain tapped softly against the apartment windows and Vincent Moretti remained beside Noah's bed without moving. The dim kitchen light cast shadows across his sharp features, softening the cold edges just enough to make him look less like the man whispered about in hotel corridors and more like someone carrying exhaustion too heavy to hide completely. Noah still held onto the sleeve of Vincent's black coat in his sleep like he was afraid the man might disappear if he let go. Claire swallowed hard. "You do not have to stay." Vincent's eyes remained on the little boy. "I know." But he still did not move. The radiator hissed softly in the corner while old pipes knocked somewhere deep inside the building. Claire suddenly became hyper-aware of every flaw inside the apartment. The peeling paint near the ceiling. The worn blanket folded over the couch. The tiny pair of children's shoes drying beside the heater because Noah's only sneakers had holes in them again after last week's rainstorm. Vincent noticed everything. She could tell by the silence. Finally, carefully, Vincent loosened Noah's fingers from his sleeve without waking him. The child sighed softly before rolling onto his side hugging the green dinosaur against his chest. Something unreadable flickered behind Vincent's gray eyes as he watched him sleep. Claire crossed her arms tightly over herself. "Thank you for bringing us home." Vincent looked toward her then. "When was the last time you slept?" The question caught her off guard. Claire blinked tiredly. "What? You look like you have been awake for days." She almost laughed at how direct he sounded. "That is called being a single mother." Vincent studied her quietly for a moment before glancing toward the kitchen counter where unpaid bills sat beneath a half-empty box of cereal. And the father? Claire's expression hardened immediately. Not involved. Vincent nodded once like he respected the boundary without needing details. But his eyes moved briefly toward the fading bruise near her wrist again. Claire instinctively tugged her sleeve down farther. You keep looking at that. Vincent answered calmly. Because you keep hiding it. The honesty hit harder than judgment would have. Claire turned away first, walking toward the sink just to give herself something to do. Dirty coffee mugs sat stacked beside cheap dish soap she had watered down to make last longer. I do not need pity. Vincent's voice stayed low behind her. Good. I do not give pity. Claire slowly faced him again. Rain shadows moved softly across the apartment walls while distant sirens echoed somewhere outside. Vincent stood perfectly composed in the middle of her tiny living room like he belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. Then why are you here? She asked quietly. The question lingered between them longer than she expected. Vincent glanced once toward Noah sleeping peacefully on the couch before answering. Because your son walked into a room full of men who fear me and offered me a plastic dinosaur. Claire stared at him silently. Vincent loosened his tie slightly for the first time all night, a small movement that somehow made him seem more human. Most people spend their lives trying not to look at me directly, he admitted quietly. He looked at me like I was lonely. Claire's chest tightened unexpectedly. Vincent walked slowly toward the rain-streaked window near the radiator, hands resting calmly in his coat pockets while the city glowed beyond the glass. My mother worked 3 jobs when I was a child, he said after a long silence. Cleaning offices during the day. Laundry at night. Whatever paid enough to survive. Claire listened carefully now. Sometimes she brought me with her because she could not afford anyone else to watch me. His eyes lowered briefly toward Noah sleeping beneath the faded blanket. I used to fall asleep in storage rooms. The confession felt strangely intimate in the quiet apartment. Claire had never imagined someone like Vincent Moretti understanding what survival actually looked like. He turned slightly toward her again. Children remember more than parents think. Claire looked toward Noah instinctively. Her throat tightened painfully when she realized how much he had already noticed. The shouting. The fear. The night she cried quietly after he fell asleep. Vincent's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Your son should not know what bruises look like. Tears burned suddenly behind Claire's eyes before she could stop them. She looked down quickly, embarrassed by how close she felt to breaking apart in front of a man who barely knew her. But Vincent did not move closer. Did not touch her. Did not offer empty comfort. He simply stood there in silence while the storm raged outside and gave her something nobody had given her in a very long time. Space to breathe. Claire did not remember falling asleep. One moment she had been sitting at the tiny kitchen table listening to rain against the windows while Vincent stood silently near the radiator. The next, pale morning light spilled across the apartment walls through cracked blinds and the smell of fresh coffee drifted softly through the air. Claire blinked in confusion before sitting upright too quickly on the couch. Her neck ached immediately. The apartment felt strangely calm. Quiet in a way mornings rarely were. Then she noticed the blanket folded carefully over her shoulders. Claire froze. She never kept blankets in the living room. Slowly, she looked toward the kitchen. Vincent Moretti stood beside the old stove wearing the same charcoal suit from the night before, though his tie was gone now and the top button of his white shirt had been loosened. Steam curled from 2 coffee mugs beside him while early sunlight softened the sharp lines of his face. For a second, the image looked unreal. A man like him did not belong inside apartments like this. Yet somehow he moved through the tiny kitchen with calm familiarity, like he understood cramped spaces and broken appliances better than expensive penthouses. Claire immediately looked toward Noah. Her son still slept peacefully beneath the blue blanket, one tiny hand curled around the plastic dinosaur while cartoon reruns played quietly on the television. Vincent noticed her panic instantly. "He woke up 30 minutes ago," he said calmly. "He wanted cereal and cartoons." Claire exhaled shakily, embarrassed she had fallen asleep at all. "You stayed." Vincent handed her one of the coffee mugs without ceremony. "You needed rest." The mug felt warm against her cold fingers. Claire stared down at it quietly. Nobody had made her coffee in years. Not without wanting something afterward. "You really do not sleep much, do you?" Vincent asked. Claire gave a tired smile without humor. "Rent does not pay itself." Vincent leaned lightly against the counter while studying her over the rim of his own coffee cup. "How many jobs?" "3. His jaw tightened slightly. "And still this place barely stays warm." Claire glanced toward the radiator making its usual clanking noise. "Welcome to Queens." Noah suddenly stirred awake on the couch. His sleepy blue eyes blinked open before landing immediately on Vincent standing in the kitchen. The little boy smiled instantly. "You stayed too." Vincent looked toward him. Something softened again behind those cold gray eyes Claire still could not fully understand. "Looks that way." Noah climbed off the couch dragging his dinosaur blanket behind him before waddling straight toward Vincent without hesitation. Claire still expected awkwardness every time her son approached him. Instead, Noah stopped directly beside Vincent's legs like it was the safest place in the apartment. "Mommy says rich people are busy." Claire nearly choked on her coffee. "Noah." But Vincent surprised her again by crouching slightly to eye level with the little boy. "Your mommy is probably right." Noah thought seriously about that answer before asking, "Then why are you here?" Silence settled softly through the apartment. Claire looked down into her coffee cup, suddenly unable to meet Vincent's eyes. But Vincent answered with simple honesty. "Because someone should make sure you and your mom are okay." Noah accepted the answer immediately. Children always knew when adults were pretending. He simply nodded before holding up his dinosaur proudly again. "Rex likes you." Vincent took the toy carefully into his large hand while Noah climbed beside him onto the couch. Claire watched quietly from the kitchen table as the most feared man she had ever met sat beside her son watching cartoons beneath weak morning sunlight filtering through broken blinds. It should have looked absurd. Instead, it looked strangely natural. Then Claire's phone buzzed suddenly against the kitchen counter. The sound shattered the fragile calm instantly. Her stomach tightened before she even looked at the screen. Unknown number. Vincent noticed her expression immediately. Claire hesitated before answering quietly. "Hello." For 2 seconds, only. Silence answered her. Then Daniel's voice came through the speaker cold and controlled. "You embarrassed me last night." Claire felt fear crawl instantly beneath her skin. Vincent slowly looked up from the couch the moment he heard her breathing change. Daniel continued softly, almost casually. "You think hiding behind rich men changes anything?" Claire gripped the phone tighter. "Do not call me again." Daniel laughed quietly. "I just wanted you to know something interesting." Claire's pulse started pounding harder. "What?" A pause. Then Daniel spoke 6 words that made the blood drain from her face completely. "Your apartment building is not safe." Claire's hand trembled so badly the phone nearly slipped from her fingers. Daniel hung up before she could answer, leaving only dead silence buzzing through the speaker. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. Colder. Unsafe in ways she had spent months trying not to think about. Vincent stood from the couch immediately the moment he saw the color drain from her face. "What did he say?" Claire lowered the phone slowly. "Nothing." Vincent's expression hardened slightly. "Claire." She hated how quickly her eyes filled with tears. Hated that fear still lived inside her body like something permanent. "He said the building is not safe." Vincent held her gaze for one long second before pulling his own phone from his coat pocket. His voice became calm and precise instantly. Adrian. The man on the other end answered immediately. Yes, sir. I need 2 men outside this address within 5 minutes. Claire shook her head quickly. No. Vincent, that is not necessary. He ignored her completely. And have someone run Daniel Harper's financials, phone records, and known associates. Claire stared at him in disbelief while he ended the call without another word. You cannot investigate people because of me. Vincent looked at her calmly. I investigate people because I do not like threats near children. Noah looked up from the couch quietly. Mommy scared? The tiny voice broke something inside Claire completely. She crossed the apartment quickly and pulled Noah into her arms while fighting tears she no longer had energy to hide. No, baby, she whispered shakily. Everything is okay. But Noah touched her cheek gently with his tiny hand. Mommy cries when she says okay. Silence filled the apartment again. Vincent turned slightly away toward the rain-streaked window like the sentence had hit somewhere too deep to show openly. 3 minutes later, headlights appeared outside the apartment building. 2 black SUVs parked quietly at the curb beneath the morning rain. Claire looked through the blinds in stunned disbelief as several men in dark coats stepped out and positioned themselves near the entrance without drawing attention. The entire street suddenly felt different. Protected. Vincent adjusted the cuff of his shirt calmly. Nobody comes near this building without my people noticing. Claire turned toward him slowly. Why are you doing this for us? Vincent's gray eyes settled on Noah sitting quietly beside her. Because somebody should have done it sooner. The honesty in his voice hurt worse than pity ever could. Noah suddenly climbed down from the couch and walked straight toward Vincent again carrying the green dinosaur in one hand. Mommy says heroes are pretend. Claire closed her eyes briefly in embarrassment. Noah. But Vincent crouched down to the child's height once more. Your mommy has probably met disappointing people. Noah considered this carefully before holding up Rex the dinosaur toward Vincent again. You can keep him so you are not lonely anymore. Claire's breath caught painfully in her chest. The apartment went perfectly silent. Vincent stared at the tiny plastic dinosaur in Noah's small outstretched hand like it weighed something far heavier. Slowly, carefully, he accepted it. Noah smiled proudly before wrapping his tiny arms around Vincent's neck without hesitation. For one suspended moment, the most feared man in Manhattan simply froze there holding a 2-year-old child who trusted him completely. Claire saw it then. Not the power. Not the expensive suits or guarded silence. She saw loneliness. Real loneliness buried so deeply beneath control that perhaps nobody else had noticed it in years. Vincent closed his eyes briefly before resting one careful hand against Noah's back. When he finally looked up at Claire again, something inside his expression had changed forever. Softer now. Human. You and your son are under my protection, he said quietly. Not possessive. Not controlling. Just certain. Like a promise carved into stone. Claire felt tears slip down her cheeks before she could stop them. Noah pulled back slightly and smiled sleepily at Vincent. Does that mean you are our friend now? Vincent looked at the child for several long seconds before answering in the gentlest voice Claire had ever heard from him. Yeah, kid. His hand tightened slightly around the little green dinosaur. I think it does. Outside, rain continued falling over New York City while men feared Vincent Moretti's name in boardrooms, back alleys, and penthouses across Manhattan. But inside apartment 3B, beneath flickering lights and old leaking pipes, a little boy had looked at the city's coldest man and seen someone worth loving anyway.